The world looks to California to answer the hard questions, for redemption, to introduce the unfamiliar, to be resilient. Because California bounces back, holds us accountable, values who we are, remains vigilant, defies those in our way, and stands for community. Here on the West Coast, we're at the center of it all. Los Angeles Times, the state of what's next.
When I first set foot on campus, The possibilities were limitless. I explored and examined at CSUN. I learned about culture, my culture, other cultures. I encountered new ways to think and new ways to connect. When I left CSUN, I was ready to get down to business, eager to engage with the world and prepared to serve. I'm Nicole Avant, and I'm a matador.
Welcome to this evening's Ideas Exchange.
When these conditions arise, we arise too.
And I think that sometimes limitation is good for artistry and good for creativity.
You're at a situation where you're like, well, is it worth it?
You cannot be an effective leader if you shortchange yourself.
I love asking why. That is my favorite question to ask, is just the why.
Take that passion and do something great with it. Save the world.
I don't have any more secrets. And that is a wonderful way to go through life.
Thank you all for watching this story, video, post, whatever this is. Thank you so much. Bye.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I am Dr. Erika Beck, President of California State University Northridge, and we are honored to co-host this event in partnership with the LA Times. Today's conversation comes at a moment in history where over the past year, we have navigated multiple intersecting crises that have highlighted the historic and persistent inequities in our communities of color across multiple dimensions, including higher education. Incremental progress is being made, but the road ahead is still long and not without its challenges. Education is one of the best tools we have to realize necessary change because it is the answer to so much of what ails us. CSUN is helping to drive this change and address societal inequities in Los Angeles and beyond. We are fourth in the nation for improving the social mobility of nearly 40,000 students and 377,000 alumni who are transforming virtually every business and industry sector throughout education in our government and across our nation. The Wall Street Journal recognizes CSUN as having the second most diverse learning environment in the country, and we are fourth in the nation in awarding bachelor's degrees to Latinx students. Diversity, inclusion, equity, and justice are championed each and every day on our campus as we work towards solutions to some of our biggest challenges. That is why it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, Centennial Chair and University Distinguished Professor of African American and Diaspora Studies in the College of Arts and Science and University Distinguished Professor of Ethics and Society in the Divinity School at Vanderbilt University. He is a thought leader on social justice and renowned author of the book that is the subject of our gathering today, Long Time Coming, Reckoning with Race in America. Joining us today to moderate is Erika D. Smith, a columnist for the Los Angeles Times, who writes about the diversity of people and places across California. She joined the Times in 2018 as an assistant editor and helped expand coverage of the state's housing and homelessness crisis. She is recipient of the Sigma Delta Chi Award for column writing. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Michael Eric Dyson and Erika D. Smith. Thank you both for joining us this evening, and I can't wait for an engaging conversation.
Thank you, President Beck. Always nice to meet another Erika D. as well. So before we get started, I wanted to remind everybody that the signed copies of A Long Time Coming, the book that we're going to be discussing today, is available at SO1 Books in Leimert Park. But in the meantime, thank you, Michael, for joining us for this discussion. It's an honor to meet you virtually.
Thank you, Erika. Great to meet you as well. Erika D, Michael, Eric D. So we're in the same We're in the same boat.
Yep, all the Erikas and all the Ds, yes. So I really enjoyed your book. It was it's not a long read, but it's a heavy read. I found myself taking walks between chapters and thinking, and it really was very thought-provoking. But one of the thoughts that I had the entire time was, what was it like to write this book during the past year, or the past however many months it took you to do it, while all of these things are going on, from the various different police shootings we've seen to the COVID-19 pandemic, to the insurrection at the Capitol. And also, can you enlighten us a little bit about the timing of when you actually wrote this and when you finished it?
Yeah, well, thank you very kindly. A writer of your esteem and elegance and eloquence, that's a high honor. Yeah, I wrote this book in the midst of the syndemic, as they said in the 90s, the convergence of two pandemics. The global virus that has besieged lives and bodies across this world, turning lungs into sponge and incinerating bones and fiber of human bodies. And on the other hand, the racial pandemic. One is, pandemic, the virus of 2019, COVID 2019, another one, COVID 1619. The persistence of racial inequity and racial inequality that continued to really haunt the horizon of American life. Nowhere more clearly seen than in the brutal death, and now we know murder, of George Floyd. So in the midst of that, Ahmaud Arbery being hunted down like an animal, George Floyd dying, various Karens across the country doing what they do best, which is doing what they do worst. And in the midst of that, I was writing, thinking, reflecting, engaging, processing trauma, trying not to be re-traumatized, but at the same time, prioritizing an engagement with the raw, naked reality of Black death as a spectacle and a performance of vulnerability before American society. So while the stuff is unfolding, I'm literally writing.
Mm-hmm. That must have been extremely difficult to be able to have that perspective, to be able to kind of take a step back while all of this is going on. The way you structured this book was so fascinating to me, that you use individual people as the subject of each chapter, everybody from Emmett Till up to Sandra Bland, to Eric Gardner, to Breonna Taylor, and mentioned, many of our brothers and sisters in between that. Why do you think, witnessing all of that Black death and the way that you spell it out in this book over decades upon decades and centuries, George Floyd was the one that cut through, that kind of connected to not just to African Americans, but to the country at large?
Yeah, and indeed to the globe. When you think about the worldwide and international response to George Floyd, I think it is because the world itself was under assault. Nature itself had turned a violent eye to its own occupants through the global virus. And that global pandemic, I think, caused people to stay at home, to be inside, to take shelter. And in that sense, because we were all watching our screens, because we were all forced in a kind of faux intimacy to engage each other. A couple weeks before the pandemic, Luddites like myself or technophobes might have been heard railing against a young person, turn that darn thing off. Put that telephone down. Speak to me. I'm right here. The pandemic made me not right here. The pandemic disappeared us from intimate engagement and physical proximity and reduced us to cameras and devices to communicate with each other. We spoke to our therapists and our priests, our loved ones, and our physicians on screen. And some of us, tragically, had to say goodbye to our loved ones online. And so the very devices that had divided us now brought us together. And we felt a greater rush of intimacy, a greater feeling of emotion in these devices. And I think because we were all at home watching our televisions or our looking at our iPhones or our iPads or our other, devices, when George Floyd's image flooded those screens, many more of us were there immediately to consume those images. Many more of us were at home and forced to be with each other and to share that experience, both nationally and internationally, in a way that it hit different, as the young people say. It just hit different. And it registered differently. And so I think that's one reason. And another is that all asterisks were removed for many white people who had made, and others, who had made excuses before. There was no asterisk, but he was running from the cops. He was laying on the ground. But he was being belligerent. He was saying, sir, and please. But he was a threat. His 6'6", 6'7" frame stretched on the ground. But the cops had no choice. They felt endangered. They bore their knees into the torso and into the legs, and with lethal intensity into the neck, the already depressed column of George Floyd, born into by the knees of now a murderer, a convicted murderer, Derek Chauvin. People saw that with their own eyes, which is the reason I think so many hundreds of thousands of white people around the country and people around the globe who are not Black flooded the streets out of immediate recognition, out of identification with Mr. Floyd, with his predicament, with the very premise of Black vulnerability as the necessary prerequisite to opening the mind and minds of people and eyes of people around the world. So I think all that stuff together, plus just being fed up with not again, and literally what? We had seen this movie before. Didn't Eric Garner die this way? Didn't you learn? And I think people went, well, wait a minute. We made excuses with the Garner video, even though the cop was not convicted. But Jiminy Cricket, you mean literally? You saw this movie, Mr. Chauvin, before, and you didn't care. The kind of willful sadism that allowed him to ignore the camera blinking, unblinkingly recording him, and without blinking, he stared into that camera and gave us a cold indifference to the fate of a fellow citizen beneath his knees. I think that got to white folk and Black folk and brown and red and yellow folk and folk of every stripe and hue and gender and orientation and sexuality and class across this nation and indeed across the world. And I think those factors made it different this time and converged to really unleash these torrential passions of protests that potentially could change this country and indeed the world.
Indeed. One of the things, as you know, has come out of this is the George Floyd and Policing Act, which has been passed by the House, is kind of stuck in the Senate. Republicans are not keen on passing it. You know, in your book, you talk about, one of your chapters is partly entitled The Blue Plague, and about how police officers remain the violent enforcers of white supremacy. When we talk about police reform, how does that factor into all the things you just said about George Floyd, the fact that we've seen this movie before, that it happened to Eric Garner, that Derek Chauvin obviously didn't care, that that the Minneapolis Police Department has been reformed before, that other police departments have been reformed before. Do you see this piece of legislation as being a solution or part of the solution, or do you think it has to be broader than that?
Well, it certainly is a beginning. And, we're forced into incrementalism because the revolution we seek cannot come except unpredictably and sometimes unconventionally, in the sense that a death sparked a movement and a revolutionary reaction that, then people glommed onto and tried to seize as a moment of reckoning. The fact is that, it could help. It's not perfect, it's not complete, it's not exhaustive, it's not comprehensive, but it is better than what we have now. Qualified immunity, cops seeking refuge in the Constitution's guarantee that they would not be personally liable or as professionals representing the state for the death of a citizen, and that you'd have to do an awful lot to be convicted as a cop. And Derek Chauvin's conviction hopefully signals a change, but we know how extraordinary it is. Look at what had to happen for Derek Chauvin to be convicted of second-degree and third-degree murder. The world had to watch. Cops had to come in and shred the thin blue line and say, we are not going to stand in solidarity with this guy. This is not what we taught. The stars had to line up together. The citizens, including children who were there that day, had to testify that what he did was wanton disregard for Black life. Look at everything that had to be in order and perfect for Mr. Chauvin, former Officer Chauvin, to be convicted. It shouldn't take all of that to get to the same result when police misbehave or when police misconduct occurs. So yeah, we need, and choose your words, abolition, reconstruction, deep and profound reform. You know, some candidates running for governor in New York or mayor of New York say we got to take $1 billion away from the police department there and redistribute it, or $500,000 from them and redistribute it. Look, all ideas on deck. And if we're going to have reform, then put teeth into reform. Make it possible for these oversight boards to have the ability to subpoena police people and other figures. Or how about the ability to call cops to real radical responsibility, and the ability to say that what is going on with these reform boards will make a significant difference in terms of holding cops responsible and accountable. What about the fact that we should have the records of these cops put out there who misbehave? Why don't we know? We know immediately if a Black person or another citizen is shot by the cops or killed by the cops, all the bad stuff they did floods the airwaves or the digital sphere. So let's have real radical responsibility and accountability for these cops. But let's talk about, why is it that cops are in high schools as opposed to, you know, counselors for mental health? Why is it that cops are policing the hallways and not others who are more accustomed to dealing with young people, even problematic and troubled young people or citizens? Why are cops being sent when somebody is having a psychotic breakdown, unless that person is wielding a weapon and like a gun or a machete? And even then, we know that cops with normal white people who wield machetes don't seem to kill them, don't seem to hunt them down and treat them like animals the same way they do Black and brown people. Yeah. So the thing is, we have to have a radical reorientation toward policing in this country, and that George Floyd bill is a start. But we're living in a country where white supremacy, we thought, was put out when Donald Trump left office. But no, we got good old Mitch McConnell. We got good old Kevin McCarthy, right? White supremacy light. Oh my God, I wouldn't dare sign on. Yes, you do every day. You reproduce the pathology of white supremacy light, your resistance to ideas that are progressive. We've got Texas legislatures trying to stop critical race theory. You wouldn't know critical race theory if Kimberly Crenshaw smacked you in the face. So all of these ideas that they're trying to engage and talk about and demonize is because they understand they are under attack, because they are really not truly representative of the best of who we are as a nation. So yeah, it's a beginning.
So yeah, I mean, do you think that, you know, talking about defunding the police, I mean, there's been several polls done, even during the height of the demonstrations last summer and as they were coming down, and public support, you know, it goes back and forth, particularly when you use the phrase defund the police. So on the one hand, you have people that are protesting and demanding change, but when that change is presented, you know, there's, you know, I'm taking even just for a second the Republicans and the white supremacist light folks out of this, but just the general masses don't seem to be willing to take that next step. What do you think is going to be required, you know, to do that? I mean, beyond the George Floyd bill, we're talking about more systemic change.
You know, I'm old school. I'm an old man. I'm 62 years old. And trick them. Trick them. Do what you got to do. I mean, you know, people get mad. Look, when Obama said, you know, it might have been, although he tried to walk it back, that using abolish the police was problematic. That's why people didn't vote. Well, wait a minute. Do you have empirical verification that there was a decline in the percentage of commitment to a particular issue or candidate as a result of the deployment of that language? Nah, you probably ain't. So you just sussing it out. You just figuring it out. You just theorize. And you got the right to do that. Common sense might tell you that if you're using a term that turns people off, that might be a problem. See, I'm an old dude. The left has to learn what the right is doing. What does the right do? They own strategy. They own tactics. They got the long game involved. They've been planning for a minute. Anti-abortion stuff. Using issues in American life, like who your superheroes are, or SpongeBob and stuff. They've been planning the culture war for a minute. So why is it that the left wing is against strategy? Black people have always had to use strategy. We were never purists because we never had the kind of legitimacy in the culture and standing where we didn't have to signify. Even our spirituals were double meaning, dual meaning. Green trees are bending, ain't got long to stay here. Oh, Harriet Tubman coming through in the springtime. Get your grist together because she's going to ride up out of here. We have to make our quilts with all these arrows. And white masters are going, boy, Lucy, that's an interesting quilt there. Thank you, massa. We telling people turn left at the Johnson plantation and get your black butt out of here. So we ain't had no choice but to signify. Why are we tripping? You got to signify. You got to, you can mean the same thing. The question is, do you want the commercial? Or do you want the product? Do you want the commercial of the car? Or do you want to sign your name on a contract where you're rolling it out the showroom? My point is, we have to have strategy, cunning, cleverness. When you describe it one way, when you say to people, are you for affirmative action? No. But are you for people who have been historically denied an opportunity to at least get a chance if they measure up mostly the same way that an actual candidate who is of majority culture does? Well, yeah, that's true. It's all how you praise it. You're in media. You know how you talk about it and how you present it makes a difference. That doesn't mean you're a sellout. Oh my God, you're not Jamal Bowman anymore. You're not AOC. You're not Ayanna Pressley. No, those are heroes. I love them. But there are two approaches. Some folk are explicit and direct. Boom. Mama said, knock you out. Some people are more, we win it more by honey than vinegar. So let's just sweet talk our way through. Let's do both and stop the calling of sellouts for people who disagree with strategy if we got the same end. All of which is to say, I'm for using whatever language is necessary to get the heck over.
Well, that's kind of, back to your point about social media. I mean, don't you think that's part of a function of social media that people have been about, or you want the commercial of the car or the car, which also gets into something you get into in your book about cancel culture. But I mean, do you think that social media has that corrosive intent on the back end of it, where there is this sense of people wanting to make a name for themselves now that maybe didn't, 10 years ago in a different way?
You ain't doing nothing but dropping truth here. I mean, and let's not pretend that people who are woke also want to be woke and paid and woke and wealthy and woke and known and woke and celebrated, right? And I'm not one of these demonizers of wokeness, although I got my critiques. But point is, some of us just want to be, everybody is a star. Mr. Sylvester Stewart said, slide in the family, Sylvester Stone, slide in the family Stone. Mr. Stewart said, everybody is a star. Everybody want to be a star. And sometimes the temptation to make my mark, to register my impact, to do that thing that will get me Twitter famous or Instagram known is there. Don't act like just because you're on the right side ideologically and politically that those considerations do not bewitch you, entrance you, seduce you, and lead you to a problematic consequence. So yeah, the thing is sometimes bad boys move in silence. Don't let Biggie have to tell you that. Don't let, Puffy have to tell you that. Real G's move in silence like lasagna. Don't have to little Wayne tell you that. Don't blab about everything you doing. Just do it. Yes, sir, on the plantation, we believe you, but we got Nat Turner working. We got Denmark Vesey working. We got Sojourner, we got Harriet Tubman doing a thing. Don't tell everything you're doing. Don't go tweet it. We're going to meet by the barn tonight to really off the masters and move on. Come on, bruh. Let's learn to have complexity, sophistication, and nuance and multiple approaches to particular issues.
Yeah, nuance is one of my favorite words that I feel like doesn't get used enough. But do you feel that there are people out there doing that? You know, that yes, we have the people over here that are doing the, you know, making a big show, but do we have that kind of under the radar back channeling? Is that happening? Do you get that sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, Jim Clyburn. Now, you could disagree with Mr. Clyburn, just 80 years old, but he looked good and he's sharp, so be careful how you treat your elders. But you know that his thing is, let's do it in the smoke-filled rooms or behind the scene or use one word and do another. Because guess what? Read the book Lucky. Jim Clyburn is the one who went up to Biden and said during his debate, you have not yet announced that you're going to choose a black woman for the Supreme Court. Now, he putting the screws to Joe Biden. He is saying, you got to do this. But outside, some people are, well, you're supporting Joe Biden, you must be a sellout. You're supporting Joe Biden, and you must be capitulating to a moderate neoliberal establishment that disallows progressive ideas. No, he was behind the scenes jacking the man up, but in public, I'm standing with this guy, but I'm forcing him, coercing him, encouraging him to do the right thing. There are all kinds of strategies. So a guy like Jim Clyburn, and guess what? Joe Biden is in there. He might as well be FDR, LBJ, Abraham Lincoln, ain't he? What in the world? Even AOC had to say, yo, I'm gonna have to give you credit, bruh. You know, or it's that generation that Saturday Night Live said, bro, hey, bro, everybody's doing it now, bro. So the thing is, Joe Biden up there acting like what? FDR, LBJ, Lincoln? You are killing the game. You're supposed to be Mr. Moderate. And yet the progressives say what you're doing is amazing. He learned a lesson from Obama. You can say bipartisan. Look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden learned lessons from black people. Oh, yes, I'm for bipartisanship. Yes, Mr. McConnell, love to talk to you. And behind the scene, slashing, smacking, smoking, just wiping them out. Just wiping them out. But when he sees them, oh, yes, I'm willing to talk to you. Absolutely. That's the best of what black people have brought to the table, signifying, implicating, inferential wisdom derived from not speaking out your mouth everything you do. Perform it, just don't announce it. And then, therefore, there will be a better possibility of realizing it. So, yeah, people like Clyburn and other folk who are just doing the business behind the scenes, and when they step up, they're able to present results. And that makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, you know, years ago, you talked about Obama, that he wasn't direct enough in addressing race when in office. And now we have Kamala Harris as vice president, who is a black woman, but also South Asian. How do you think that she has to live up to those same standards? And how is she playing out in all of this effort, you know, for justice, not just among black Americans, but also among Asian Americans now, given, you know, some of the attacks that we've seen over the last year or so?
Yeah, well, she's benefited from the first black presidency because she can be a bit more explicit, right? She's HBCU. She's sister girl. She with the sorority. Obama ain't been to no black college. In fact, he was trying to close some of them down and was really critical. That's a no-no in black culture, bruh. You better be a Morehouse man or a Spelman sister now and recognize, even, you know, symbolically, and recognize what those colleges have meant and those universities have meant. She came up from them. So she has a more organic relationship, a more institutional connection and tie to those places and spaces in black life. So she's been more, you know, seen as more legitimately connected to them, although she had her first, I think, blowback when she said she agreed that this is not a racist nation. People like, come on now, where you been now? Come on now. So, yeah, it's difficult. It's not impossible. It's difficult, but it's more, I think, palatable in this particular age when we've had such strong strides made against white supremacy, social injustice, economic inequality, and the vicious white nationalism that besieged the White House and this nation that led to January 6th of this year. So I think that, but it's still difficult. It ain't easy, but it's made more difficult, more smooth the road by the first black president who had to toe the line, who now is, acting blacker than he could when he was in office. He and Michelle have a certain kind of freedom because you ain't the president no more, but you ain't the president no more, but you ain't got the same power when you speak. And so you say, man, the opportunity was when you had it, bruh. Like Michael Jordan says, when I get out of, basketball, I'll speak up, bruh. They don't care then. You Jordan. Although Jordan's longevity has been pretty remarkable. But the thing is that when you got the bully pulpit, use it. And again, I think that's a lesson Joe Biden has learned. Now, Joe Biden has white privilege on his side. He ain't got to worry about what Obama had to worry about. The same way that Bill Clinton didn't have to worry about it. He could play a saxophone and not be seen stereotypically. Joe Biden can speak about white nationalism in his inaugural address and white supremacy. Man, have we ever had a president do that? Nope. A president who said, black people, you took care of me, I'm going to take care of you. I mean, man, I don't think Obama could say that. Because then, and not only did he not say it, he ain't really tried to do it because he felt hamstrung. So there's a greater freedom, ironically enough, in the performance of blackness by a white man like Biden, who can do more directly what Obama couldn't do. But I think Kamala Harris is in a spot where she can step the game up, so to speak. She's not the head woman in charge. She is the vice president, but she's close enough to that seat of power to inherit some of its possibilities as well as its responsibilities. And I think she's tried to toe the line and tried to stand up and represent, while at the same time being, nuanced and sophisticated in her exemplification of what her blackness is.
One of the things you mentioned a few minutes ago was about the insurrection. And in your book, you talk about the idea of the black next and the white again. And this idea of this push and pull, and that we're never going to get any sort of true reckoning on racial injustice unless we deal with that. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that and kind of how that's playing out? You see that playing out now with this transition from Trump to Biden and the national politics and the backlash from McConnell et al.
Right. Yeah, black next to me is black people always looking for the next opportunity, the next keyword, the next form of music, the next protest, right? Relentlessly persisting in the face of the white again, because white America collectively, especially the dominant part that wants to subordinate black America, is let's do this again. We had enslavement, let's do it again. Through plantation politics and Jim Crow, let's do it again. Through those who were sharecropping, let's do it again. Through post-Reconstruction denial of opportunity, let's do it again. Through implicit bias, let's do it again, right? Again. The white again is the reassertion of white dominance to maintain it again. The black next is the black next opportunity to resist white supremacy and to assert black identity and black freedom and emancipation. So there's that push-pull between them. And we see this again, make America great again, while black people looking for the next opportunity to resist that white supremacy. And again, Donald Trump's out of office, but the ideas are there. The deference to Donald Trump is still there. Kevin McCarthy first caught, a case of bravery and courage when he spoke against him, but then went right back. And Mitch McConnell the same way, because they figured this dude is going to run against Biden in 4 years or 3 years, whatever it is. And so, they want to be very careful about to-a-dying and genuflecting and making sure that they're obsequious in their, embrace of Mr. Trump. And they don't care that he's a white supremacist, or at least he supports white supremacist ideas, white nationalism. They don't care that a white nationalist was one of his major advisors. And so at the expense of comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, not comedy, though it's a black comedy to be sure. But, at the expense of parity and unity and equality and democracy and justice, they have put party above country. They have tried to turn this into a Trumpocracy, and the viciousness of the white supremacy upsurge has not been at all mitigated by the politics of a Mitch McConnell or a Kevin McCarthy. So as far as I'm concerned, they're complicit in that very thing, the white next, in very civil form, but nonetheless lethal.
Mm-hmm. I mean, but, you know, fighting back against that seems like it's going to be having to maintain that coalition that, you know, first arose last summer after George Floyd. I mean, do you feel like we are maintaining that coalition against that, or are there people kind of splitting off, or how are we doing as far as like maintaining that solidarity?
Well, you know, it's a push and pull thing. It's an up and down thing. You get crests and you get trials, you get ups and downs, you get peaks and valleys. I hate to sound cliched talking to a great writer, but you know, that's what it is. And so it doesn't last always. It rises, then it falls, it subsides, it reasserts, and you never can tell. You know, never can tell when I'm down for a jack move. You too, boy, if you mess with me. Okay, I'm sorry, I had to go NWA. I'm talking to LA Times. I had to hit you with the 1989, 1988 NWA. After police said it with authority. But anyway, so the thing is that you never can tell what I'm down for a jack move. You never can tell when something's going to happen. when there will be an upsurgence or a resurgence or a recrudescence. You don't know. So you do your work. Paul says in the Bible, some people plant the seed, some people water the seed, and God makes it grow. And so you don't know when, if you plant the seed, you don't know when it's going to happen. Somebody else got to water the seed, you don't know when it's going to sprout. And suddenly, God makes the thing happen. So you got to figure out, are you the seed planter? Are you the seed waterer? Or are you God? I figure you ain't God, so calm down. But you can preside over the conditions that make it propitious for those seeds to grow. And so our responsibility is to do what we know to be the right thing at all times. And at the right time, it will catch fire and change the world.
One of the things you said not to do in your book, though, is to embrace cancel culture. And, you know, that's as Obama, it's a touchy topic, you know, not just from the Republican side. You were, of course, using it and exploiting it to all ends beyond the actual definition. and then there's, you know, the reality of what is cancel culture. So, I mean, can you explain a little bit about what you mean by that and why we shouldn't be? Because, you know, social media, you know, people get canceled hourly.
I mean, daily, monthly, you know, by the minute, by the second, by the gigabyte. If your giga don't bite, they might. Okay. So the thing is that, yeah, I don't mean what the right wing means. I don't mean what Donald Trump and these mean. They mad because they've been held accountable. They mad because they can't be racist without complication. They mad because they can't be sexist and patriarchal and transphobic and homophobic without some sense of accountability. So I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about the left wing eating its own. I'm talking about progressives just being mad at each other and going after each other or whoever and trying to cancel people and wipe them out and eviscerate an entire career. You mean you could do something right for 30 years and you mess up one time and you gone? Now, it depends on what that mess up is. I ain't talking about you going out and slaughter an entire village, okay? That might be one time, but you got to go. But we're talking about making human error. We're talking about for which people apologize. But no, there's no apology. There's no mess up, which means you presume everybody's perfect, which means even though you haunt the right wing for their theologies of providence, you must think you're God. You must think you're the embodiment of perfection because you don't believe anybody has the grace enough to be forgiven for a mistake. And we have to be much more, I think, understanding. Look, this zero tolerance is a right-wing idea used against black bodies to kick black kids and brown kids and indigenous kids out of school. So for me, I think it's extremely necessary for us to talk about dealing with forgiveness, with understanding, with the humanity of our fellow citizens, and understanding that we have to be extremely careful about eviscerating others, enemies, opponents, people on our side, out of a narrow, vicious consideration of self-aggrandizing moral purity while not acknowledging you might be the canceler today, you could be the cancelee tomorrow.
How do you communicate that to people? I mean, part of the, I would say, the reckoning that started and the upheaval that started last year was just Black folks just being fed up with everything, as you mentioned at the beginning of our discussion. And a lot of people are out of patience. They're out of forgiveness. We see people who are just like, I'm not talking to you. Changing your mind is not going to happen. So why should I try? Which I think leads to some canceling online. How do you kind of wind that back? Considering that some of the, people with actual power in our movement are some of the ones that are canceling or kind of leading the charge on some of these things.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate and tragic. We got to find a different way. And yeah, I understand being hurt and upset, tired, exhausted. But if Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, some Black people want to cancel him. If Malcolm were alive today, there are some Black people who'd want to cancel him. So just think about that. Like, I'm old enough to know when they tried to cancel Whitney Houston. She ain't Black enough. She don't sing Black enough songs. I can't identify with her. And then when the Bobby Brown and television and the reality show, then the crack cocaine and stuff. Oh my God, what, is she blacker than Black now? You got to uncancel her, right? Don't take your momentary estimation of a human being or an act or a gesture as the ultimate indictment of or censoring of their entire career, life, trajectory. If they made a mistake, acknowledge it, confess it, acknowledge what you did is wrong, and then be given the grace to make a difference, to make a change. Because isn't it ironic? The very people who want to cancel prison want to engage in cancel culture. But prison is cancel culture of a sort, isn't it? You're anti-incarceration. You want to abolish the police, but you want to police and cancel people, right? You want to police the boundaries so that you wipe them out. You want to commit a Derek Chauvin act while claiming you hate what Derek Chauvin does. But if you cancel somebody, if you eviscerate them, if you completely wipe them out, you in league with Derek Chauvin. You just think you're on the other side. But it's still the same gesture of heartless, conscienceless remediation, except the remediation is evisceration. You wipe them out. You destroy them. Done. Career over. How you gonna judge somebody based on one bad game? One bad play in a game? One bad season, for that matter, to use a sports analogy. Again, there are some things that are so awful. Yes, I get it. But many of the things we're trying to cancel people for are not. And it takes a kind of exaggerated sense of self-importance and a kind of clinical distance. Is it any wonder that cancel culture arises in an age of machinery and technology where we don't have intimate connection anyway? That it's just like deleting, an email, deleting a text, deleting a life. And we have to be extremely careful about that and to be seduced by the means of technology that have provided us the moral content of our actions and identities. We have to be very careful about confusing those two.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the last chapter in your book, you talk about white comfort and about how white people have been able to kind of have that distance and not see Black life in all of its contradictions and its beauty and everything else. And, a lot of the pushback to people who believe in cancel culture, who practice cancel culture, is that they don't want to give in to white comfort. Like, it's not my job to help you, white person, learn this. It's not my job to help you become a better person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do you reconcile those two things where you literally have white comfort is a thing, as you talk about in your book, but also cancel culture has this kind of toxic effect? So how do you reconcile those two things to people who are potentially wrestling with this?
Well, I get it. I mean, I get why it's difficult to say to white people, hey, W.B. Du Bois wrote a book in 1903. I don't know if you know that or not, but Souls of Black Folks been out for a minute. If y'all were really curious, you'd have found it. Be as curious about Black life as you are about stars and Mars and romance and animals and the like. So I understand that. Have that kind of curiosity. Because be as ingenious about helping Black people as you were destroying them. I get when Black people say, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, it's not my job. I was joking with some of my students one day in class because they were like, we didn't come here to teach white people. We have our own classes. And I understand that. Because if on top of you competing with white folk for good grades and, internships and placements in careers, you got to also teach the white folk who don't give a darn about you so that they can be more invested in a certain kind of knowledge about Blackness that they can then use to jump and boost their career above you. Yeah, that's kind of crazy, right? That's cray. On the other hand, I was joking with some of my students when I said, yeah, I didn't come here to be teaching white people. I said, oh, I'm a professor. I guess I did. Yeah, that's kind of my job. Yeah. So, yeah. So the thing is, I tell white folk, if you meet Black people who say they're tired, accept that. Who are exhausted, accept that. But there are many more Black people who ain't. See, that's the thing. That's why you got to have more than one Black friend. You got to have more than one Black ally. Because some of the Black people will be telling you, I'm tired, Bob. I'm tired. Don't ask me nothing. No. And then there are other Black people go, sit down, Bob. Let me tell you about critical race theory. Let me tell you about intersectionality. It's not just what happens when there's a green light on one side and a red light on the other. So the thing is, you got to have more than one Black friend so you can have more than one Black response to particular issues so you can understand the complexity, the nuance, the sophistication. And some Black people are tired. They don't want to talk. Some Black people are infinitely capable of talking to you. We'll talk to you until time is over. And let me tell you what. You may be tired of talking to them, but the right-wing Blacks ain't. Some people on the other side ain't. Clarence Thomas ain't. Condoleezza Rice ain't. They gonna talk to him. So you mad that you tell white folk, if you don't know, come to me. Then they come to you. I ain't got time for you. Wait, what? So now some people can't claim to be ignorant about some stuff that they are deliberately and willfully ignorant about. But if they really don't know, I think it's my responsibility to tell them. You remember that story of Malcolm X when the white woman came up to him, white girl? She heard him in Boston. She was so enchanted by him. She followed him, found a way to find him in New York City. That white woman traveled all that way from Boston to New York. Minister Malcolm, what can I do as a white girl? Nothing. Now, he regretted that later, and he said so. But a lot of people got that like nothing. You can't do nothing. Get out my face. I ain't going to talk to you. Ain't nothing you can do. You ain't going to learn anyway. But you don't know that. You ain't God. You don't know what they're going to learn. Paul was on his way to kill some people who were Christian. Then he ended up being the greatest darn, commissioned apostle for God. Like, you don't know where your Damascus Road, racially speaking, will end up. So, again, plant the seed, water the seed, God's going to make it grow. You don't know what you planted in even a willful rejection and repudiation of Black identity. You don't know how that's going to come to fruition in 10 years. So I understand Black people being discouraged. I understand them being tired. But again, are we going to cancel you because as a Black person, you didn't know what cisgender meant? Stop it. You weren't using cisgender 5 years ago. Should we cancel you? Oh my God. You didn't know transphobia was a thing? What? I'm going to call Janet Mock on you right now. Like, stop. Like the thing you trying to cancel somebody on, you better hope women are kinder to you. I'm an anti-racist. I hope I'm an anti-sexist and anti-misogynist, but I got misogyny in me. I hope I don't get canceled because I mess up 1 time, 2 times, 10 times. I'm an ally.
Canceled at least 10 times anyway, so it's probably, yeah.
Yeah, right. Somebody could cancel you. While you're doing all the canceling, you could get canceled. And we're doing this retroactive cancel 20 years ago. Did you do this? Where's the amnesty? Where's the like, hey, it used to be a different set of rules. There's some different rules now. Now, if you do it now, you know you in trouble, so don't act like you didn't know.
Yeah,
but I can't hold you accountable 10 years ago for some stuff we didn't even know. Some stuff we didn't even have. We didn't know about heteronormativity. Stop it, bruh. We weren't talking about, we didn't even know about Juneteenth till we went to college. So stop it. Don't act like you were celebrating Juneteenth. So the thing is there are a lot of things that we have to be accountable for, and we should be, but we should also be kind and generous and understand.
Absolutely. Well, I want to move on to a couple questions from our viewers while we still have some time. We have about 12 minutes left. So we have a question from Leroy who said, my white friends still have a very difficult time talking candidly about race. How can I get them to see that this is a discussion that's beneficial for them too?
See, but that's the point. Can you blame white people? If I mess up, they're going to cancel me, man. I'm not saying nothing, bruh. No, bro, I'm not doing it. And now I'm not saying that's the only reason. But I'm saying create spaces where it is safe for white folk to say stupid stuff, even if they're serious and curious and honest, and be able to have that conversation. Because white folk ain't going to take the chance to have that conversation. Like, let's be real. If you're a critic of Me Too now, do you have a space in America? No. I mean legitimate. I don't mean the reactionary, masculine, machismo, sexist. I'm talking about like, do you really want to have as your motto, believe women? Because you'd have to believe Tawana Brawley, and you'd have to believe Carolyn Bryant, who lied about Emmett Till. Now that's just, I love you. I'm for Me Too. But is that your motto? I mean, you want to rethink that? You sexist, you misogynist, cancel him now. Ain't nobody gonna say that. Ain't no safe space. Oh, did I just say it? I thought it was just me and you talking. Oh my God, Jiminy Cricket, the LA Times Book Fair. I've now said it. We have no space to create an opportunity for real knowledge, which means you're going to say stupid stuff, which means you have to be taken seriously and engaged and taught and rebuffed and then brought into the fold again. So for white people, yes, it is an extremely helpful conversation. Don't act like you don't talk about race anyway. White folk talk about race. They don't talk about it with black and brown people present. And that's a problem because ain't nobody there to help you correct some of the narrowness that you think even when you're doing good stuff, you might be saying some whack stuff. So it's good to have an interaction with varieties of peoples, especially peoples of color, who can help regulate, govern, give you insight, feedback, or just give you some warning. Bruh, don't say that with the brothers and sisters now, because you're going to get beat down. Okay, you know, ixnay on the isbay, you know, and to be able to engage. But we have to encourage white brothers and sisters to tell the truth. When I go to my classes, speak up. I can guarantee you a safe spot that you will not be run out of the class because of something you say. I just can't guarantee you that some of your black fellow students and brown fellow students and Asian brothers and sisters ain't gonna wear you out and engage you. But that's the opportunity to learn back and forth. So we've got to create those kind of spaces where we give people permission to be curious and to learn and to make mistakes and to grow. That's why cancel culture is a non-starter. And then you mad when white folk ain't gonna speak up, but they gonna do what they gonna do now. Behind the scene, they just ain't gonna tell you. And so now you have even less access to the levers of power to be able to shift, change, and retool the forces that need to be addressed if we're going to talk about white supremacy, social injustice in this country.
Yeah, and actually leads me to the next question, which is from Bellin, which is, how can non-Black people of color support and take tangible actions to help our Black family, friends, and colleagues?
Non-Black people of color. Yes, that's extremely important. Latinx, Asian brothers and sisters and the like. We all have to be honest. Like, if we look at what's going on with the anti-Asian sentiment here, let's be honest. Some of that is Black-led, Black-tinged. When we see Black people beating up on Asian people, they can't get no pass and no card of exception because they're Black. That's wrong. Now we've internalized vicious anti-Asian identity. We've internalized the hatred of the other that we've been taught on a steady diet of pedagogy of oppression against those who are vulnerable. We got to call that to account. And we have to ask Asian brothers and sisters and Latinx brothers and sisters and, indigenous people, all of us, to be sensitive to the issues of the other. Anti-Blackness is deep. And it comes in every variety of ethnicity that's found in communities of color across this country. Toni Morrison said that when people come to America, the first thing they learn, right, is to who is at the bottom of the totem pole. On the backs of Black people, this nation was built, and people build their case for being a legitimate American by hating on Black folk as an immigrant. So let's be honest about that and talk about the seduction of anti-Blackness as the price, as the ticket that is being stamped in order for people to become fully fledged Americans. That's real talk too.
I have a question from Paul, jumping ahead to some more recent information. With the recent voter suppression efforts across the country, what do you think is the best approach for our activist civil rights groups and minority voters to combat them?
Yeah, I like how y'all put those questions up in bookmarks and stuff, man. LA Times is kind of dope, man.
We're being
Maybe
fancy.
I get LA Times. Can I get, huh? What's that?
So we're being fancy.
Yeah, real fancy, man. I might have to, just win a LA Times book prize just so I can see that again. Look, we've got to do everything we've been doing. The Stacey Abrams approach is important. Oh, you going to voter suppress, as Secretary of State Brian Kemp running for governor? How disingenuous and dishonest is that? Well, you put 800,000 people off the rolls. Well, I'm going to put 800,000 people back on and add 300,000, or 500,000 and add 300,000 just for good measure. So, we got to do everything we can. First of all, we got to vote, right? No matter what, in the midst of the miasma, the hurt, the pain, the trauma, the shenanigans, the trichnosis, all the stuff they doing, we got to still show up. We got to still go out there, because they are, 400 bills in, across this country in state legislatures that are trying to suppress the vote. Texas just passed this anti-critical race theory stuff, or putting it forward. Are you kidding me? And so we've got to stand up. Civil rights groups have to call it out. They have to continue to articulate a valuable reckoning with racial animus and anti-blackness and the tricks that white politicians use and the language they deploy to try to hurt Black people, brown people, red and yellow people, people of all colors, and trying to say that you got to have, look, y'all didn't mind when you were voting for George Bush that people didn't have no driver's license. All of a sudden you need it. You said, Mr. Kemp, that the election in Georgia was perfectly fine. Well, why are you changing stuff? Same in Florida. Why are you changing? Arizona, why are you changing? You said it was good. You said Trump was lying. Now you try to act like the only one reason. You get mad when Trump targets you, but you use Trump's targeting of Black and brown and red and yellow people as a means to achieve your goals. You ain't nothing but a Trump by association. You a white supremacist by ventriloquism. Your mouth moving, Trump's ideas are coming out.
It kind of leads to a question from Jacqueline, who asks, Black people have been marching and protesting forever, and we're still protesting. What's it going to take for Black people to finally be able to achieve equal status without taking to the streets? Or is that even possible? That's my last ad.
Yeah, I don't know. Not in this lifetime. As Jay-Z said, if you'd have told me I was going to be selling clothes, I wasn't in my right mind. Not in this lifetime. Sorry, had to hit you with the jigger too. Yeah, it's going to be tough. The right to protest is one of the things we're guaranteed. But then the necessity of it is something that is also vouchsafed in a culture that continues to oppose us. And we got to continue. It's tiring. I'm tired of marching. Tired of marching for something that should have been mine at birth. That's what Martin Luther King Jr. said in the 60s. I'm tired. So we tired now if he was tired then, but you got to keep on doing it. Got to keep on insisting that what we must do is to resist white supremacy, fight against social injustice, demand our rightful place for our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, and for the country's future. Yes, it is tiring and exhausting and fatiguing, but we got to continue to do it. No, not in our lifetime. I don't think protesting and marching is going to be finished with. Not at all.
Well, for the last question, it's coming from Clint, and it kind of leads to your Jigga reference. But Mr. Dyson, I first saw you speak 20 years ago about the life and death of Tupac Shakur. What is the role of hip hop right now in America's racial reckoning? You can say that if you want to answer.
You even got Lil Baby writing about, these mothers are grieving about, the cops, they be killing us and so on. I mean, Lil Baby is writing protest songs. Come on now. You got Da Baby, Lil Baby, Baby's mama. I don't know all these. Golly. I mean, I sound like an old man, don't I? Good God Almighty, what the hell? Hey, what y'all be saying anyway? How you gonna protest a mumble rap protest? This one comes, hooked up, fist out, we'll sit down. Every time I talk about it, we'll take what I say about it. Know what I'm saying? No, son. No, actually, I don't know. The part I would say, walk it like you talk it. Hey, walk it like you talk it. Hey! I understood that part. So if you have a protest, you can't mumble rap it. You got to be a little bit more Rakim. Standing by the speaker. Suddenly I had a fever. Wasn't me or either Summer Madness. You're going to be like Pac. Just the other day, I got lynched by some crooked cops, and to this day, the same cops on the beat getting major pay. But when I get my check, they taking tax out, so we paying the cops to knock the blacks out. Jay-Z said, Bin Laden been happening in Manhattan. Back then, back when police was Al-Qaeda to black men. So I ain't jumping on the mumble rappers, because maybe the reason you mumbling is that even when we were being clear and articulate, you still killed us. So they just gonna dress it up for their own people, have their own vernacular, their own language, their own way of saying it. I get it. So protest the best you know how. Hip hop is to raise consciousness. All great art is to be itself. Some art makes you feel uncomfortable. Black art is not here to simply coddle you, to convince you that you are a human being. That's beautiful. It needs to do that. But also, it's here to challenge you, to challenge your bigotry and bias, your narrowness, to be irreverent, right? That's why cancel culture is problematic. There's no room for creative irreverence, for uplifting irreverence, because you're going to get canceled before you can signify. Comedians, clowns, Dave Chappelle say things that make us angry. Chris Rock, Amy Schumer, right? They make us uncomfortable, but we got to say it. We got to talk it some more. Monique, you got to say stuff. Whoopi Goldberg, you got to get in there and get under people's skin at the same time. But also, the role of great art is to make us think, to challenge us out of our narrow ways, to uplift and affirm the greatest values of the culture, and to amplify our resistance to those forces that would undercut our humanity. So in that sense, hip hop's responsibility is to keep churning away. Dang, it's only right that I was born to use mics, and the stuff that I write is even tougher than dice. I'm taking rapping to a new plateau through rap, so my rhyming is a vitamin hell without a capsule. A smooth criminal on beat breaks. Never put me in your box if your ish eats tapes. From Illmatic, 1994.
Oh, yeah.
To God, Nasir Jones.
Now I'm going to have to go listen to a bunch of old school hip hop. Thank you for that.
Go do it. Go do it.
Well, I think we're out of time. I wanted to thank you so much for this conversation and dropping some knowledge. It's been amusing and very helpful. And I think I probably can speak for all the viewers that we enjoyed it. So thank you so much. And I want to thank our presenting sponsor, CSUN, and also to President Beck, also known as Erika D. And finally, thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope to see you at another Ideas Exchange very soon. And remember that signed copies of A Long Time Coming, which was our topic of conversation today, are available from S.O. Juan Bookstore in Leimert Park. So thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you, President Beck. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Great out LA Times. What up? Snoop, what's happening? Kendrick Lamar, what it is. All righty.